Hi, welcome to Module 3. Chapter 4, we'll first start off talking about fingerprints. How relative are fingerprints when it comes to a criminal investigation? How do investigators use fingerprints to link the crime that's been committed to a suspect? Are there two people with the same fingerprints on this earth? The answer is no. Each of our fingerprints are unique to only us, which means my fingerprint will not resemble yours and your fingerprint will not resemble mine. That is why when you are arrested or you go for a job, you will find that they will take your fingerprints. It used to be where they put it in all this dark ink and mess up the paper. Now they have digital computer options where they could take your fingerprint, log into a database, and it's kept forever and shared all over the world. So fingerprints are an important part of the crime laboratory. As I said, the databases that they use to collect and keep the fingerprints, they're unique to only certain people, and those fingerprints can be used years and years down the line. Just say you commit a crime 10 years from now and they took your fingerprints this year, they will be able to, if you left fingerprints, remember the Lockhart's theory of exchange, or Lockhart's principle, says that you leave something behind. So generally everywhere that you touch, if you touched your finger, you're leaving a fingerprint. You're leaving a fingerprint. And as I said, those fingerprints are often observed, or they'll take the item that the fingerprint is on. Just say it's a window pane. They'll take that pane and they will dust it and use tape to get your fingerprint off. They will then take that information to the crime lab and they will develop it with the necessary tools to see if that fingerprint comes back to you. They have a database that they put it in and it will run for a while. This is within the latent print unit. It'll run for a while to see if that print comes back to a specific person. And that's normally how they solve crimes. Of course, in Mississippi, our crime laboratory, or one of them, is located in Pearl, Mississippi. And we visited that lab several times and actually got to see how this fingerprint, of course, fingerprint as well as DNA, toxicology, paints, glues, all of that is processed in the crime lab. Why is fingerprint important? Fingerprints important, like I said earlier, it's unique to every person. And your text has an interesting page in it which shows you what type of fingerprints that you may have. There are arches, loops, and whorls. If you take your hand and press down on your finger, you should see the pattern of fingerprint that you have. Compare that with what's in the book, and it's interesting. You'll be able to see, unless you're like me, sometimes dehydrated. But you should be able to see the pattern of your fingerprint. You should be able to see that. So now we move to DNA. Let's talk about DNA. And I can't draw today, but we're going to make that be DNA. DNA. Each person, as well as fingerprints, DNA is unique. And I mentioned this in the previous chapter. DNA is unique. It's like the blueprint of every organism on your body. In every cell, there is DNA. So there's no way you can come into contact with something and not leave DNA behind. And we know through the Innocence Project, before we began to develop DNA and actually use it to solve cases, a lot of people were convicted and they later found out through DNA that they had convicted the wrong people or the wrong person. So a lot of innocent people were in prison before DNA came along, and now they are out because they realized after we started to use DNA more that they had actually gotten the wrong DNA. We can go on to facial composites. Facial composites is another interesting fact, and this is not anything new. This was a theory way long time ago where they would take the structure of a person's face and tell whether or not they could commit a crime. So the facial composites And look at the guys here in our screen. Look at all of these gentlemen, and it looks kind of like their face, except one, their face is similar. So doing a facial composite, you may ask a witness, well, tell me how I look, and they'll have a sketch artist come in, and that person will draw what the witness is saying, and they'll use that as a description. You may have seen it on the news sometimes. They'll use that to identify whether or not, or to help the public know how a suspect looks so that they can apprehend him. So facial composites are very, very, very important. And then next in this chapter, we'll get to eyewitness identification, which is a very interesting subject, because this is going to tie right into our discussion post, eyewitness identification. In our discussion post this week, you will actually have to identify a suspect, or attempt to identify a suspect. Is the suspect in the lineup? And I'm going to have fun reading your responses, because this is an interesting exercise. So that's pretty much an overview of chapter 4. Let's move on to chapter 5. Chapter 5 gets into the law. The law, legal issues in criminal investigations. And not just criminal investigations, but legal issues in every field. The U.S. Constitution is the guide that just about every investigator, every police officer, every lawmaker uses to tell whether or not a person's rights have been violated. So you can get out of the Constitution due process through the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom to carry our weapons. All of that can be found in the United States Constitution. So it's kind of the Bible of the law. And you will find that when there's an issue of a violation of a person's constitutional right, then these issues can go all the way up to the Supreme Court, but they have to be involving a constitutional amendment or constitutional right in order for the Supreme Court to hear the case. So this chapter is going to get us into the Constitution. We'll be talking about several important cases. Miranda v. Arizona, which is very important. You may have heard of the Miranda warning. It's very important for you to know, not just for this chapter, but for all the other chapters that we'll discuss. Weeks v. United States, Mapp v. Ohio, Graham v. Connor, Arizona v. Gant. These are just some of the cases. So make sure that you get your notepad and to jot down these cases. Tennessee v. Gardner, which is a case on deadly force as it relates to police officers. So we're going to get into these cases, and this will be kind of like a miniature law lesson for you in this chapter. It's going to talk about searches. When you're pulled over by the police, can they search your vehicle? Do they have a right to search your vehicle? Good question, huh? A lot of people don't know. But if a police officer has probable cause, which he has to have a reasonable suspicion or probable cause to pull you over, just say they pull you over for failure to obey the traffic signal. Say you ran a stop light, or just say you failed to turn on your blinker. Yes, they can pull you over for that. Then when they walk up to the car, they smell a strong odor of marijuana. Then that leads from reasonable suspicion to probable cause. At that point, the officer has the right to search your vehicle. He has the right to ask you out of the vehicle. He has the right to ask the passengers what their names is. And I tell all my students this: any offense is an arrestable offense, meaning that you can be arrested for any traffic violation, any offense that you commit, and a law enforcement officer observes it. Any offense. So don't say, well, you're not getting my ID, or you're not getting nothing, because it's just going to make it hard for yourself. Cooperate. An officer can detain you on the roadside for at least 2 hours while he investigates. And so don't be smart or get an attitude, because that's just going to make it worse. So searches, he has the right to search you if he has probable cause, if he suspects that there may be weapons or some other item that may place his life or someone else's life in danger. If he's going to arrest you, there's a search with incident to arrest. We're going to discuss all of that in this chapter, and it can go on and on about these searches. Officers do have a right to search. Now, they can get a warrant. if they have time to get a warrant. When they don't, it's called exigent circumstances, and this means that something is going on. You may destroy evidence, or they think somebody's dying or in dire need, so they can come in and search a place for that immediately without a warrant. The things that they have to have warrants for, if you are a murder suspect, and I think that there's evidence in your house, of course, they get a judge to sign off on a warrant for that. So just know your rights, and that's very important. The warrantless searches that we are going to discuss will tell you when they don't have to have a warrant, as I just mentioned. There's also something called the exclusionary rule, which states that courts will exclude any evidence that was illegally obtained, even though it may be relevant material to the case. Meaning, if they come in, just say you're sitting in your house and they know you have marijuana and they have time to get a warrant, but they don't. They come in, they could have gotten a warrant, then the judge won't allow that evidence into court. It's called the fruit of the poisonous tree. So there are many exceptions to the that will help substantiate this exclusionary rule. The good faith exception, inevitable discovery doctrine, imputed errors exception. You're going to read about those as well. Plain view doctrine. Anything that's in plain view, the officer can see it, then he can search it. If he can see it, he can search it. It's in his plain view. And I like to say wingspan. That means spread your arms out, and as far as they go out, the front and back, he can search that. And last but definitely not least, because we've seen this a lot in the news, use of force. What is considered excessive use of force? That is a very controversial subject. So I want you to dig deep into this book, deep into this book, and find out exactly what's considered use of force. We have something that we call the continuum of force, which means that the officer start at a level and it escalates as a situation escalates. So a lot of what we see on the news may be examples of use of force, and a lot of it may not. That's what these chapters 4 and 5, are going to give you a great description of. I want you to take all the notes that you can. Be prepared for our discussion board. I'm excited about that. I can't wait to see your responses. As usual, you will be required to respond to at least 2 of your classmates with a meaningful post. And all of this is due by Sunday. If you have any questions, you can reach me again at kaharris@homecc.edu or via our chat. Have a great week.